button or behind the blue curtain. Here. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about jihad. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks what it is we do on this podcast?
You know what on this podcast? You know, we drink from the waters of life. Okay, buddy? You know, okay. You blindsided me a little bit with that one.
You know, I don't even remember. Do they use the term jihad in the movie? Like, I read all the books. So, like, I am like, you know, like
is that in the books?
Oh yeah, all sorts of like that's like. I mean, I read it when I was a little bit older, but I have heard like people say that that's where they learned the term jihad from. Was the Dune
wild?
Books. Yeah.
But okay, I get it. I guess. Yeah, sure. Okay, fuck. I mean, yeah, Dune 2. All right.
Yeah, we're talking about Dune 2. Man. Let's give our pre-spoiler
sure.
impressions. You want to go first?
Yeah. Okay. It's really hard. It's really hard to put this into words. Besides just saying, Denis Villeneuve, 10 years ago, I came on the podcast and I said that Denis Villeneuve is my favorite director. Okay. I said this about his movie Sicario. And then after that, he had Arrival. And then after that, he had something else. You know, but he's made a couple of movies. Dune 1, I famously loved. I thought it was a piece of like cinematic splendor that we just don't get a lot of these days. But I also think that movie was like good, not great, right? I have some issues with sort of Dune 1, and even though I love it quite a lot and I've rewatched it a bunch of times kind of since then, you know, I don't know, it didn't click for me in this like same sort of transcendent level. Dune 2 is pretty transcendent. There is so much to love about this movie. Just from I feel like I could tackle it from a dozen different perspectives and fill like this hour and a half podcast. Just like on the sound design, the cinematography, like the music. There's just like so much stuff that I think is so good that it's really hard for me to I don't know, it's really hard for me to not recommend it. One thing I will say is I watched this at a Dolby theater. Dolby are special theaters that, for me, it's AMC, right? They have these special theaters where the blacks are blacker because they use special projectors, and also the sounds are better because of, I don't know, whatever they do with the special sound stuff. I would recommend that wholeheartedly. I've recommended that a bunch of times in this podcast, but like Dune is the kind of movie that you want to watch in sort of like a Dolby, you know, in sort of a Dolby setting. Yeah, it is the kind of thing that I don't think will play well on a computer screen, but it will kill in the theater. So that's my full-throated, okay, you know, reverential review before we get into spoiler talk.
Yeah, no, I also very much enjoyed the film. I do have some issues with it. I have spent a lot of time, and I'm still spending the time trying to figure out if I actually dislike certain things or if I'm just mad because they're different than the book. Because there are definitely a couple of those things, right? And I think there's one that's a carryover from the first movie, and then there's a second one that I'm a little bit more mixed on. There's a couple things I'm a little bit more mixed on. I'm still going into, but I also thought it was excellent. You know, there's only so much of a picture a book can paint, and also I will say that Frank Herbert did not necessarily paint the most vivid pictures of stuff with words, which honestly gives you know the director plenty of room to run and imagine and do something great. And he does. It's an absolute masterpiece visually. You know, all those kinds of aspects, kind of 10 out of 10. All kind of like the cinematic aspects of it, I will give 10 out of 10. There, like I said, there's some story things that I'm not the biggest fan of, but again, some of that's a matter of loyalty to the books.
Sure.
but yeah, I would definitely recommend seeing it, even if you're a hardcore Dune purist. I think there's something there. Um, uh, I will. I'm. You said that there's supposed to be a part 3 at some point, right? Like there must be because there's not a cliffhanger.
Is it really a cliffhanger?
Well, I mean, I
Is
guess
this a cliffhanger for the first book or?
so. I won't say anything until we
Okay.
get to spoilers because
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So what I understand is that
this is
that
definitively the end of the first book.
Okay. That that Dune, that there's a third, like is it a trilogy now? That they added a movie, I think is really what it came down to. So
yeah, it'll be interesting if they just do Dune. So this doesn't contain any spoilers. Dune Messiah takes place 12 years after Dune. And I think Brian Herbert, I have not read any of the Brian Herbert books. Brian is Frank Herbert's son. He co-wrote them with another author, and they're widely considered to be, at the very least, not as good as Frank's stuff, like much more kind of like generic sci-fi. Many people actively despise them. I have not bothered to read them. I know fan of the chat Lou, or friend of the cast Lou, has in the past said that they are not worth reading.
okay, so I will say that I'm right that a sequel to this, which covers Dune Messiah, I guess, which is the second novel in the series. That is theoretically what they are. I don't know. I guess looking to.
I can't imagine doing Dune Messiah in 1 if they did Dune in 2.
Okay.
Honestly, so I want them to get to God Emperor, but sure. that's a whole other thing. Also, how much do you care about like Dune lore spoilers?
I don't. I am down to talk about all that stuff.
All right, so you know what? I will save it for the spoiler section. The books are old, but let's put a spoiler warning here. Spoilers for Dune 1. Spoilers for Dune 2. Spoilers for all of the Frank Herbert books in the series. Possibly spoilers for the non-Frank Herbert books if some of our friends in the chat pop in and decide to tell us things. So here's your spoilers. Spoilers. All right. Something about Dune Messiah that I think you will enjoy is Jason Momoa will be back on screen.
Yes, we talked about this. Okay. Duncan Idaho comes back and he's like cloned a bunch or something.
So Agola is a kind of clone. In the world of Dune, when they create the first Duncan Idaho Gola, they have not figured out how to like make them actually that person, right? They kind of they're kind of like a real clone would be, right? They're just another person that looks the same and is genetically identical. There's no reason to believe that they would that it would be Duncan Idaho again. Over the course of Dune Messiah, an event happens that I won't spoil that causes him to revert to his Duncan Idaho-ness. Like he essentially gains his memories back, which is kind of like, it's a very spiritual level thing. Like there's like some sort. This is like so. The Reverend Mothers in Dune lore literally have the memories of all of their ancestors. Like it's some genetic something, right? Like I don't know if this is supposed to be like spirituality or if like Frank Herbert writes this in 1965. The knowledge of genetics is relatively new, and he's kind of like, sure, that could work like that, right? But like something like that happens with the Golas, and then there are more Duncan Idahos, but they only ever get the memories of the first Duncan Idaho, and then way in like one of the later books, Agola eventually gets all of the memories of all of the Duncan Idahos.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
Wild.
Yeah, Duncan Idaho is the most consistent character in like he's the only character that's in every single one of the Frank Herbert Dune books.
Okay,
it's not the same
Fair
Duncan
enough.
Idaho, right? Because dies in Dune, but yeah, yeah. So I'm actually curious, how much do you understand what the Kwisatz Haderach is?
The Kwisatz Haderach is the I'm sorry, hold on. I gotta think. Firstly, we have hulud, that's the worms. We have lisan al-ghaib, that's the Messiah figure in the Fremen lore. So it's not Kwisatz Haderach. What else do we have? He's it's not his name. He's al-Muad'Dib. I guess Kwisatz Haderach is that the Messiah that the Reverend Mothers are? Is that his sister? Is
No.
Kwisatz Haderach, or he is Kwisatz Haderach?
So he's the Kwisatz Haderach. So
Okay.
Muad'Dib is his like war name, right? It's the kangaroo mouse. But the Kwisatz Haderach. So the Bene Gesserit have been doing a eugenics breeding program for like generations, right? I think.
Okay, so the prospect is the Kwisatz Haderach. It could be Paul Atreides, and it also could be, God, what's that guy's name?
Fade Roka.
Yeah.
All right, so
no. Okay, fuck.
So Paul was supposed to be a girl, right? The Bene Gesserit are capable of controlling the sex of their children, and the Bene Gesserit told Lady Jessica to have a daughter, and she loved Duke Leto so much that she gave him a son. The next generation was supposed to be the Kwisatz Haderach. So the Reverend Mothers have the access to all of the memories of their ancestors, and I can't remember the justification, but it won't work with men, right? Like for whatever reason, if you try and do it with men, they'll die, right? Like that happens in the movie. Through this careful breeding program, they were moving towards the Kwisatz Haderach, which is a male Reverend Mother essentially, and Paul has done this early, right? He's done this a generation early, which is interesting, given later developments. But that's why he can, it works on him. He gets prescience because he also gets everything in the past. So the Reverend Mothers get all the memories of their female ancestors, right? Kwisatz Haderach has access to all of his ancestors, male and female.
Okay.
Like at one point in the books, he like goes and like gets tactical advice from like Genghis Khan or something, right? Like it gets weird, right? It gets very weird. But
okay, so the Bene Gesserit want to make the Kwisatz Haderach, and Paul unintentionally is the Kwisatz Haderach, and drinking the water of life is what awakens his crazy prescience powers.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Well,
is it true for all Bene Gesserit?
So no, only Reverend Mothers. So the Bene Gesserit is like an order of like, let's imagine them as like an order of nuns.
Yeah,
and like the special ones become Reverend Mothers, right?
And they go to Arrakis. They drink the water of life.
It is not always on Arrakis. Like they have other ways of doing it, I think.
Also, just remind me, the reason spice is important is because it's only found on Arrakis, and spice lets them drug themselves to do crazy space calculations because computers can't, because AI is bad. That's all correct?
Yes.
The way you exploded like internally with like unspoken lore.
Yes. Right. It was like I could either go on a 10-minute tangent explaining the Butlerian Jihad and like, but yes, spice basically lets you do like super math, right? And it lets the spacers do things, and it also gives normies like vague amounts of prescience, right?
Okay.
But like and it's only on Dune, which is why at the end of this movie, the threat that makes sense is he points all of his nukes at the spice, so that like, even though he's in a position to directly attack the other great houses, he's basically got them in a trap, because if the spice is gone, basically the galaxy ends and everybody's trapped on their planets because you can't navigate space. Without going into some of the crazier stuff. But yeah. So you mentioned Fade Routha. I thought that scene was absolutely perfect.
Well, I'm sorry, which scene?
His scene in the Coliseum.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the black and white scene. Like 10 out of 10.
This is the thing that really elevated the movie to me. And my understanding is that this is not in the book. this detail about how the world works, right? That it's under the black sun and it bleaches all of their skin, right? And how, you know, it is so overpoweringly bright that there isn't even color. It's all in black and white on whatever the name of that planet is, or whatever. It's just like, this is the kind of like visual set. This is like if I was about to say, this is like if Zack Snyder were good. Oh, pains me. But
Yeah.
like this is the kind of stuff I love about like Zack Snyder, right? But you know, weaponized by a director that I guess I should say has a I don't know, just a better sense for like story and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, no,
It was so awesome.
it reminded me of the similar theme from Thor: Love and Thunder, and again, much better, you know, in a much better movie. That was my favorite part of that movie, even though I didn't like that movie very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that detail is not in the book, right? Like, this is what I'm saying when, like, you know, like a lot of this stuff, like there are a lot of details that go left unsaid, and like, you know,
Because it's not visual, right?
yeah.
Okay.
A lot of, you know, I mean, if it was important to the plot, he would have said it, but it really isn't. It's just kind of there for visuals. But yeah, honestly, Fade Routha gets a bit. I'm probably pronouncing their name wrong, but he gets a better. He cheats at the end of the book. Like, he tries to poison. Like, he cheats by like poisoning Paul with yeah.
Does it really all come down to just like a one-on-one knife fight?
Yes. Yeah.
That is the greatest shit I've ever heard in my fucking life. I know, like I love science fiction and everything, and I love huge, grand space. Like I go so hard for any of that stuff. But in the same way that, like, you know, like Aquaman also did this, right? Where it has this huge, gigantic battle at the end, but then it just comes down mano a mano, Aquaman versus Orm. They fight it out. Like, it's so good, right? It's just so cool.
Yeah.
And for them to do that in like a knife fight with like actual fight choreography, like there was all this stuff. There's this part where Paul does like a side spin flip thing that I'm just like, this is the coolest shit.
No, and that's also, I think great to the movie's credit, right? Like, I haven't. It's been a little while since I've read Dune, but like, I remember like the battle stuff being kind of like, and then they did a thing and they won, right? Like, there's not always there's sometimes detail around like the knife fights, but like the bigger battles, right? Like, just kind of get like glossed over because there's only so many words you can devote to, like, you know. And then they fired a rocket and a thing blew up, right? Like, mostly just kind of like words about, like, you know, teeming masses of devotees. But like, so that's one of the things I really enjoyed about the movie, was kind of like bringing a lot of that to life, and making that real. The criticism I do want to bring forward from the first movie is I still think they did Lady Jessica dirty, in this movie. I thought they did her dirty in the first movie. Basically, they made her too much of kind of like a stereotypical woman almost, right? Like, in the book, she is like a stone cold operator. Her biggest emotional like dalliance is like giving Leto a son, right? It's like disobeying the Bene Gesserit and giving Leto a son. Otherwise, she's just like, you know, in the book, she immediately recognizes that this religion is planted by the Bene Gesserit, and she's like, I can turn this to my advantage. I can, like, you know, win essentially by, like, you know, leveraging this Bene Gesserit thing that is available to me, right? There is some of the same stuff though, where, like, you know, Aaliyah is not supposed, like, there are two crazy kids in this book. Paul is not supposed to be the Kwisatz Haderach, and becoming a Reverend Mother while you're pregnant is, like, not supposed to happen, right? Like, that's why Aaliyah's kind of all weird. They play her a little bit more, or a lot more sinister than she is in the book. The whole thing, which is interesting because down the line that turns out to be warranted, which is why I'm like, oh, they must be doing more, because you know, Aaliyah is in the first couple of books, in the first two books, I believe, Aaliyah is like basically is a protagonist, but in the third book things go a little bit sideways, without spoiling too much. But
You know, it's funny. I loved her character. I don't know that I really wanna. It's complicated. Obviously, the Harkonnens are just like so coded as villains
Right.
that it's hard to say that anybody else feels like kind of like an antagonist or whatever. But the thing that really I connect to on a thematic level, right, is Paul's I don't know, reluctance maybe is like what it comes down to, right? Like the part where this is like obviously going to be my favorite quote because it's somebody screaming something into the camera where he screams that's not hope to his mom when she's talking about leveraging the, like leveraging the religion in that way to like manipulate these people, right? And she says, "Oh, we gave them hope." It's like, damn, that's the kind of thing that I really, I don't know, that I really connect to. Deuteragonist is pretty interesting.
I think she's referring to what I would talk about Aaliyah. There is a reason why like I am hesitant to use that, but like that's I don't know. Lou, you've read the books, right? Like you know what I'm like. Aaliyah is basically a good guy in the second book, and like not so much in the third book.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the Deuteragonist, my understanding, is just like like a secondary protagonist under the first protagonist, right? So, for instance, in like Lord of the Rings, you'd say Frodo is the protagonist, but Aragorn is sort of the Deuteragonist, right?
Okay, yeah.
They're both, pursuing different goals and aims, and they kind of look like protagonists, that kind of thing. Anyway, I really loved sort of the tension there, right? Paul wants to be a good person, right? He believes, like God, the most heart-wrenching thing is turning to Chani and repeating the thing that he told her because he's and the part I don't know if how real this is because he's prescient, right? So he knows he's gonna win the fight, right? Like, does
Um,
he know how stuff breaks down in that kind of detail?
at this point, this is one of the bigger themes, right? Is like later in the series, he gets like so tied to his predictions that he can't break free of them. Like he's essentially because he is so reliant on his predictions that he can't change the future, right? Like he is kind of like nailed to his faith. But at this point, it is more possibilities than it is things that are known, right? Like certainly it would give. And I think it's also too early in his development of who he is to like really use it in kind of like a moment to moment basis.
Okay, that's fine. That ruins a little bit of what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because in the moment it made this work really well for me. Once like he became sort of prescient, and he talks about the line, right? And he says, I have this thin line that I can walk to get
the golden path.
Is that what it's called? Okay.
I'm not sure. I can't remember if he says the golden path or if that's like his son's thing, but like it's essentially the same thing, right? Like there's like a narrow.
Yeah. Okay. He talks about that line, and that got me in the mindset that like, oh, he sees the future and is like sticking to it, and it was gut wrenching. It was gut wrenching, right, for him to sort of know that he's gonna fight Feyd-Rautha, win, right, go to kill the Emperor, and then the Emperor's daughter is gonna sort of trade her hand in marriage for her father's sort of life. He knows all of that is going to happen, and he still turns to this woman who's the love of his life, and he tells her the same thing that he told her when they like first got together, right? I love you for as long as I breathe. And it's just like, God, what a tragic moment. I wanted to cry. I did cry, actually. I cried like 9 times in this fucking movie.
So think about that, and this is one of the changes that I think I'm okay with, but not necessarily. So in the book, he like marries Princess, like there's it's not a problem, right? He marries Princess Irulan, refuses to ever sleep with her, and like just has kids with Chani. Like like she's like essentially like his like she is his wife in everything but name, right? And like and she's fine with that, right? Like I get that like like the changes she's mad about it, right? Like that makes sense. But like and like that's actually a driver of conflict in the second book is like Princess Irulan. It's like, why won't you fuck me? But
okay. All right. Okay. Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It was so perfect. It was just what a perfect way to sort of like end this movie on this like kind of like tragic note. This is when I talk about sort of like Aquaman, what I love about Aquaman is this sense of responsibility. It's these stories about like the absolute unbearable weight of responsibility that this guy has. Paul is in this exact same vein, which I think is part of why I'm like, I don't know, vibing so fucking hard with it. And also
Sure.
just I don't know, I loved Fade Brotha. Fade Brotha is something that I sort of think was missing from the first movie in terms of not just as like a villain, right? But as a presence, I guess I would almost call it, right? He just like he does that thing with the knife where he licks the back of the knife, and he keeps just like slitting people's throats. um I don't know. I love that shit. Like Fate
Yeah.
Rotha, there's something like savage and cruel and malicious, right, and cunning that he really works for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, and he like, he's also pretty late breaking in the book. Uh but it's interesting because the book is a lot more kind of like, it's a lot more about like weird politics than it is about like, about the moment to moment action. Although of the books, this one's the most that is about the action. But I definitely feel that. Something I actually want to comment on is he the movie leaves a lot for like me as someone who's a fan of the books to like be like, oh, I get that, right? Like, oh, I picked up on that, right? Like, do you understand how the sandworm riding works? Like, why?
Okay, let me see if I can explain. The sandworm riding gets under those little clips, and there are those like vents, I guess. And so the idea, I think, is that by pulling the vents, you are influencing the worm's breathing, maybe?
Kind of, yeah. So essentially,
Okay.
by holding those open, it can't dive because otherwise it will suffocate itself, right? It will.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it will suffocate itself. Interesting. That is actually really clever. That's
Yeah,
actually really
yeah.
cool.
And he
This is
explains.
oh god, this is one of the things I love about this movie too. It doesn't do I'm sorry. Anyway, you keep going.
No,
It doesn't do that like hand holy bullshit.
right. It doesn't do it handholdy, right? Like I'm like, I get it because I see it, and like you picked up on enough of it, but it's like it's
Yeah.
also like like you've got something to like go read the book for, right? Like to like fill in some of these little details, which I think makes it pretty great. But yeah, Charles in the chat says he had to explain it to his partner. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I definitely think that that's one of the aspects I like most about this. I've described this as Gonzo in the past, right? These movies that are sort of just like buck wild, but they don't explain themselves to you too much, right? You get a little bit of it. You get the sand walk, right? Oh, why do we do the sand walk? Okay, now this makes sense, right? But you don't get whatever like they do the sandworm sort of stuff. It reminds me a lot of I don't know, Lord of the Rings has quite a lot of this. I don't know, what's maybe like the best example I can think of? Mad Max Fury Road actually is probably the best example. Mad Max Fury Road is a world where all of the characters understand all aspects of the world, right? There's no moment where somebody sits down and explains to Max, well, we're the bullet farmers and we, make all of the guns in this unit. It's like you don't do any of that. He just exists in the world. These characters just exist in the world, and all you need to do is be an attentive, you know, audience member, and you will pick this shit up, right? You understand the nature of um the war boys and for Valhalla and chroming their mouths and getting high on the like on the chrome paint or whatever, as this guy and they all do the witness me thing, right? Like this is explaining an entire religion that these guys have built, right? All in the middle of an action scene, which is so good. And Dune does so fucking much of this. I love it, right? The part with the smugglers, they meet Gurney Halleck, right? They find Gurney Halleck again, and you're like, wait, what is he doing? And all he has to do is he just kind of says, oh yeah, well, the Harkonnens, you guys are fucking them up, so smuggling business is pretty good. There's smugglers on Arrakis. This is awesome, right? That kind of stuff. I just go so insane for.
Yeah. No, I mean that's in the writing too. I think it does a great. The movie's just very good at dealing with
Is
all
Mr.
this.
Collins doing something?
Yeah, Mr. Collins is.
See you looking at that off screen.
Sorry, Mr. Collins is meowing at me. I gave him food, so I don't know what he wants, but
Cats.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So I was interested by Fade Rotha's introduction. is the interaction between him and his brother and Baron Harkonnen, right? Is all that just like
Yeah,
from the books,
that's
basically?
basically the same from what I remember. Kind of like the same kind of like the Baron wants to push his nephew a little bit just in case best case scenario he's formed an indelible successor. Worst case scenario he's killed a failure and he's no longer being threatened, right?
Is Paul really Baron Harkonnen's grandson?
Yes, yes.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, Baron Harkonnen is, in the chat. Charles says Baron Harkonnen is a huge hard on for Fade from the beginning. Yes, but I do remember basically that kind of that kind of let him testing him really. Yeah, he's also gay. Yes,
He's
yes.
also gay?
He's
Big
also
Brother
like
or Baron Harkonnen?
Baron Harkonnen in like
Okay.
a gross way, like in a way that's not okay, right?
Like in a homophobic way. I'm about to get offended. Okay.
like in a I think it's implied that he's a pedophile way. If I remember correctly, it's been
Christos.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, yeah, like it's been a while, so I'm not going to do any call anything back off the top of my head, but he's
Sure. Are there other great houses in the first book that don't get mentioned?
So they are there, but they are not. They are mentioned about as much, right?
Okay.
I forgot about this. Charles and Faye tries to kill him by putting a poison needle in the boy's house, right where the Baron would grab. Yes, that is.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Okay. What did you think about the Emperor and like the Princess? They're a big addition to Dune 2, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so Princess Erlon in the book, Princess Erlon doesn't spend a lot of time on screen, but the openings to each chapter is a quote. How she's writing in her journal. Those things happen, but they're all they're all quotes from a book that she wrote after having married the Emperor, right?
Oh.
So
so you don't know that Emperor is Paul at the time?
No, you do. Yeah, it's one of those things where the conclusion is forgotten. You just kind of see what happens along the way. The tension of whether or not he succeeds is.
So are you telling me this is like one of those stories where the Who's Baba O'Reilly is playing and there's like a record scratch freeze frame as Paul is like, I bet you're wondering how I got here, but he's Emperor and he's
no because he's not a presence he is. It's not like there's an opening scene, right? It's quote from the Diaries of Princess Erlon, wife of the Emperor Muad'Dib or something like that, right? Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
So it's just about kind of knowing about the journey to get there. It's almost like a history book, right? Watching a movie about a famous sports game, right? It's what happened, right? What happened.
No, listen, I'm on board with that. That's crazy. God, okay. Well, did you appreciate that Gurney Halleck got to sing a song with his little banjo shit? Was that cool?
I did.
I felt like that was a detail because you mentioned the last, and I've thought about it ever since. Paul has the thing where he says, "Oh, sing us a song." To Gurney when they're doing weapons training because Duncan Idaho leaves for Arrakis, and you were like, this was a reference to him being a bard back in whatever, and so yeah.
No, he pulls out his thing. He sings the song. Not as much as he does in the book, but that's because that's one of those things where occasionally. Charles and Chess says much of the intercalary notes are kind of incomprehensible the first time around. I don't know if I 100% agree with that. Maybe. I obviously can't read the book for the first time again, but
I don't know. Maybe I'll have to read the book for the first time.
Yeah, you should read the book. I think it's definitely worth a read. It's pretty good, and then you can get into the real good stuff. You can get into Duncan
To the real
Idaho's.
buck wild shit. Why do these stories always go so buck wild? This is sort of like Foundation. Foundation got so fucking wild after the first couple of books,
Yeah,
which is yeah.
I've told you, Mango's iron law of world building, right? Any world that goes on for long enough will become stupid.
Will become stupid. That's true. I guess so. Yeah.
Although I will say that I thought Dune never got stupid, or never got stupid under Frank. Maybe it just he died before he could get like really like it gets pretty wild, right? Like there are, in addition,
I don't know, this stuff with Duncan Idaho is pretty fucking wild.
They're like, besides like the very obvious space Muslims, there are like explicit space Jews at some point later in the books. Yeah. They're like a key part of like, I think the 6th or the 7th book. Yeah, and they're like the ones that are most like, they are the most like their Earth religion because they keep the tradition the most closely. Whereas like everything's kind of like through like a prism that you could imagine being like, oh, like 10,000 years in the future, this is how things changed, right? Like
yeah, the Fremen being space Muslims is sort of like an interesting. It's funny because I think that there's obviously like a lot of coding that goes into it, but like there's not a lot that I would call like direct allegory, right? Which is different, right? Like things can be coded one way in sort of like a subtextual way versus something in like a more straightforward allegorical way, right?
Right. Yes. The Freemen are not supposed to directly be like like the Mongol hordes or something, right? Or like I guess the Ottoman hordes maybe. They're not supposed to be. Like I do not.
Yeah, because it's not like exactly like we once had a super long argument. Do you remember this about the Qunari in Dragon Age? You're like they're Chinese, and I said that they're Muslim. Do you remember this?
I do not remember this. I have not played a ton of Dragon Age, so maybe I was.
Yeah, so the Qunari in they like they follow this book called the Qun, and I always read them as essentially being a Muslim allegory in sort of like a traditional Western European sort of I don't know, space, right? Like they are followers of a different religion that comes from a huge empire at the time that would have been like the Muslim caliphates. It comes from a huge empire, but that is sort of removed, right? It's out there. It's Parvalin, right? Which is, I don't even remember. It's somewhere out in kind of like the Dragon Age world. And there are a number of different things that are included. There's another couple of like signifiers that are included in kind of like Qunari lore, right? One of them, which is that there are re-education camps, right? For people who, balk at worship of the Qun. This is what I think, there's a couple of Qunari who are exiled or something like that. Like maybe Sten from the first book is like, or from the first game is like this, is like an exiled Qunari. Like the re-education camps. Anyway, a lot of this stuff is all coding, right? It's all like on a very like textual kind of level. And so the Fremen being essentially kind of like space Muslims is definitely happening on this like level of kind of like coding.
Yeah, no, in the chat, Charles says that the spice is not a direct allegory for oil. I think that's a lot closer, but I also think it's like, yeah, it's pretty close. I will grant you that, Charles.
Is it really? I mean, I don't know, like the spice coming only from Arrakis and being controlled only by like one sort of thing is like, that's like very different than oil. Oil is all over the globe, right? You have oil in Venezuela, you have oil in North America, you have Russian oil, you have, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but it's the focus of the most valuable thing being in like the Middle East equivalent is kind of like that's the most surface level. Okay. That's the most surface level reading, I think.
Yeah, it's 100% oil. I guess. I think it's Texas. Okay, there's a lot of oil in Texas, Charles. The Fremen are just cowboys. They ride worms, Mango. Prove me wrong. They're religious fundamentalists. Prove me wrong. I'm not going to go this any further. It's pretty funny, though.
The Fremen are keeping the invaders from coming over the space borders.
Oh God. It's honestly pretty funny to think about.
Yeah, Charles says you live in the 2000s. I think the oil question was a lot more focused on the Middle East in the 1960s when Frank Herbert is writing Dune.
You live in the yeah, after the U.S. is oil independent. You know what? Fair enough. I can't confirm Arrakis is Texas. Listen, do they have Whataburger on Arrakis? That's what we all need to know. Okay. I want to make so many jokes. My mind is aflame with 10 gallons still stewed at. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I asked this question about the Emperor before we got off on a million tangents.
Like the Emperor, the Punisher Emperor doesn't really have like a huge active role in the book, if I remember correctly. And so like him being Christopher Walken makes like I feel like him being Christopher Walken is more of a reference to Weapon of Choice than it is a reference to Dune. With Dune, which in the Weapon of Choice also contains reference to Dune, right? Like
really, the music video?
Yeah, walk without rhythm, so you don't.
Oh,
yeah, something the worm, right? Like that's a direct reference to Dune. Yeah.
wow, that's wild. That's true though. That is a reference. Yeah. Do you know? Oh shit, it's dudes. Do you know that meme?
No,
it's a tweet. I'm sure I can look it up. You put it in the show notes. It's a tweet from a long time ago where somebody, somebody was talking about Dune, and they were like, God, why the fuck are? Hold on. Oh shit, it's dudes. God, Google sucks so bad. Dune guy. We have to walk without rhythm so we don't attract the worm. Worm understands 177 over 13 time signature. Oh shit, it's dudes.
Yeah. So yeah. Man. I don't know.
I really did not know that was a weapon. Yeah, a weapon of choice blows my mind. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have these sort of bits parts, right? Léa Seydoux, right? The French actress, the famously super hot French actress who is in a bunch of stuff as she's born to play femme fatales, right? It's her role in Harry Potter or I'm not Harry Potter. What am I thinking? James Bond, other British super spy. Okay, James Bond. It's her role in Mission Impossible, right? She's in this. Anya Taylor-Joy is in this for 5 seconds. I'm
gonna say that I thought for the entire movie that Fade was Jesse Eisenberg. It was until after the movie when I looked it up that I realized that it wasn't him.
Yeah, do you know Austin Butler? Do you know who? Because he did Elvis two or 3 years ago.
I didn't watch. I didn't see that.
This is a big breakout role. Elvis. Maybe it's not called Elvis. Elvis is a great movie though. Elvis is a movie where Tom Hanks plays a really smarmy.
Yeah.
It's the movie about Elvis's shitty manager, the Colonel.
Yeah.
And it's just wild seeing Tom Hanks play essentially a villain character, right? But it's sold from his point of view, and he's obviously whatever. But there's a great moment where he it's done by who's the Romeo and Juliet guy, Moulin Rouge guy, God, famous director. What the fuck is his name? The Great Gatsby guy. What the fuck? Who is he? This is gonna kill me. I have to look it up. Oh, Baz Luhrmann. Yes, he's from Baz Luhrmann. Okay. So just this Elvis movie, and they're listening to a guy. They're listening to Elvis play. I think maybe it's on the radio, or maybe it's in a circus, thing at a sideshow, and he's playing rock and roll, right? And the Colonel is there. And somebody walks up to the Colonel and is like, "Oh, this guy's pretty good." And the Colonel's like, "Yeah, he's pretty good." And then the person goes "Yeah, pretty good for a white boy." And then the camera zooms into Tom Hanks' face and he goes, "He's white?" And it's the most memeable thing. Anyway, Austin Butler is fantastic in that movie, and it's really this like kind of breakout thing. And he obviously wrote it to this. You know, he wrote it to playing Fade Rotha, where he's just like constantly slitting people's throats and throwing them to his. I was explaining this to Rachel earlier, where I guess he has like cannibal lesbian. He has a cannibal lesbian polycule, of his like crazy black mouthed girlfriends or whatever. They're eating people, right? That's cannibalism, right?
Yeah. I mean, yes. It's the Harkonnens. They just do whatever the fuck they want, right? Like, you caught the part where like, the Baron like killed two of the servants and they screamed before like because he was mad, right? Like,
Yeah, he just killed them. He just killed the shit out of them.
Yeah. Before Raban walks in and it's like, oh, I'm sorry for being bad and everything.
I honestly feel bad for Dave Bautista. I think Dave Bautista is better than this role. There's a lot of people who I think kind of they got it and they went hard for it. Timothee Chalamet, amazing, right? Austin Butler, amazing. Honestly, who really impressed me was Florence Pugh. In a real small role, but like she,
who is
nailed it, right? The princess.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
She just has this like I'm not sure about this like look on her face the whole movie because she's talking to whatever the Reverend Mother,
because she's also like caught between everything, right? Like she is like a Bene Gesserit initiate, right? Which like may be more for the Bene Gesserit's benefit than for hers, right? Like and she doesn't know exactly what's happening. And she's
Stilgar, he was huge in this. Or I'm sorry, is it Stilgar?
Stilgar. Yeah.
Stilgar,
Stilgar was amazing. That was probably my favorite role of the movie. She's kind of cucked the whole time. Yes, I explained this to Buddy beforehand that like that
he just keeps fucking Chani.
Yeah, and that Chani doesn't have a problem with any of this, right? Like, well, this is also like mirrored, right? Like, I don't think they go over this, but in his mother's marriage or his mother's not marriage, right? Like Duke Leto never marries Lady Jessica because he wants to hold open the possibility of marriage as like a political tool, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Lou says it's like Paul's parents, yes. And that I think at some point they say that like that Leto's biggest regret was never marrying Jessica because like he needed to hold it open. Charles says I hate how they changed Chani's story. This is the one that I'm not sure about whether I hate it or not, and like whether or not I have a problem with it, right? Like the one I definitely have a problem with is I think they did Jessica dirty. They also I don't remember, and maybe I'm just misremembering it, but I don't remember this kind of like north-south, atheist Fremen versus like fanatical Fremen divide. Like if I remember correctly, like once he gets the ball rolling, it's all kind of like everybody's on board with like with Paul, like the jihad man, but but he does go through a lot of the stuff that I think is the most important, right? Which is like if I screw this up, billions will die, or if I screw this up, trillions will die, and if I get it right, billions will die, right? Like and then it goes to a whole nother level in God Emperor, which is
it's actually kind of wild because when was Foundation?
I've heard people discuss that like Foundation is kind of like the flip side of Dune in a lot of ways.
So Foundation was published in 1951. It actually makes sense. Foundation is built on a pretty similar kind of like in terms of like premise, right? The sort of core science fiction conceit of Foundation is that there is a field of study which is called psychohistory, right? Which is a field of math that basically says people are predictable in larger numbers, right? One person is individually unpredictable. 10 people is more predictable. 100 million people is very predictable. It kind of you would almost think about it like, I don't know, like polling or something like that in like modern kind of terms. Right. But this is obviously sort of the 50s. And the core conceit is there's this great galactic empire, trillions upon trillions of souls on single individual planets, right? There's a planet called Trantor, which is sort of proto-Coruscant. It is an ecumenopolis, right? A planet that has been terraformed to be entirely a city. And he talks about how there are, I think, 4 quadrillion people on the surface of Trantor or whatever, which actually makes Trantor a very predictable sort of thing. This guy, Harry Seldon, this like famous, crazy mathematician, historian. He accurately charts he's accurately charting kind of like the history of this galactic empire, and he realizes that the galactic empire is crumbling. And so what he does is he enacts a plan to create what is called the Foundation, right? The Foundation is sort of a collection of psychohistorians and scholars and all this other out in the corner of the galaxy on a planet called Terminus. And by creating the Foundation and keeping the Foundation like aligned to the plan, the Foundation will prevent. It's like 30,000 years of, you know, galactic anarchy will become 1,000 years of galactic anarchy, and a new grand galactic empire will like rise from the ashes once that 1,000-year period is sort of like over. So it's like dealing with very similar themes of this kind of like, you know, trillions will die, billions will die, right? You know, 30,000 years of anarchy, 1,000. That's true. Yeah, I am. There are no historians in Foundation. Psychohistory is one thing that the Foundation never sees. There's actually I don't even know, should I spoil this? There's a second Foundation, which is called the Second Foundation, who are all of the psychohistorians, and they are managing from afar, you know, puppeting, right, the Foundation on Terminus and making sure the Foundation on Terminus like follows the great plan. In fact, there's a great deviation that happens in the second book when a singular individual mutant is born and a singular person isn't predictable by Harry Seldon's plan. And there's this whole thing about how that deviation create like he describes, you know, like they go to the Second Foundation and they see the huge massive equation that Harry Seldon first made and all of the deviations that were created and how they got back onto the plan after like this whole thing. It's very crazy. I fucking love Foundation.
No,
It's a TV show that I have yet to watch, actually, but it would be a good thing, I feel like, to dig into.
no, that's super interesting because like, in God Emperor of Dune, right? Like one of the things that that Leto 2 is doing. Leto 2 is Paul's second son named Leto, because something that doesn't happen in the movie, which is probably good, is Paul has a kid with Chani, Leto, who gets killed in the fight. And then later he has another son. He has twins with Chani, Leto and Gaia or something like that. They never mention the fact they're both named Leto. They just kind of like, you know, forget about the first baby Leto. But he becomes the God Emperor, and without giving too much away, he's like, one of the things he is doing is like interbreeding Atreides with Idaho in such a way to make the spice prediction like, for whatever reason, the spice prediction do not work on Atreides. I think because of something stemming from the Kwisatz Haderach thing. And so by like spreading enough of their genes throughout the world, or throughout the universe, it basically makes like the prediction powers like less useful and less doable, which ultimately keeps humanity from stagnating and like spiraling into nothingness.
Interesting. The thing that makes Paul really go jihad in the book is his son is killed. That's what makes him go drink the life. I mean, listen, I think we should all go drink, but it would
really kill you and me. Probably even kill like
That's
a normal
true.
woman, right? Like I don't think anybody can just drink. I don't think any woman can drink the waters of life and become a reverend mother.
Is the waters of life explained more in detail in the book? Like, what is it a poison? Is it like the stomach acid? Is there blood or?
So it's basically like the reveal is that. So the thing is that like the baby sandworms don't look like sandworms. They look kind of like flounders. And so like part of the reveal is that these sandfish are actually the baby forms of sandworms, right? Like that's like a reveal. And so like drowning them, creating the water of life is the thing that happens in the book. But it is under slightly different circumstances. You know, it's like, oh, this is actually kind of like, you know, super spice, right? Because it's from like natal worms, and the worms, like, spice is worm shit essentially. Was that
okay? Oh, all right.
Yeah. That might be. I think it's literally worm shit, but it is a byproduct of like worm biological processes, which I think is supposed to be like a, you know, like a euphemism for worm shit. Oh, it's bile. That makes sense.
I was gonna say, I really like the idea though of like a worm taking fucking like laxatives. Listen, the spice must flow, Mango. Okay. It's the bile of the drowned sandworm, and its super toxic venom has rid of crazy powers over their bodies and can convert it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff about the religion and their kind of like forced sort of manipulation of it, right? Like that's in the book, right? It's
Yes.
not just for the movie. That's really interesting. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about kind of savior stories in relation to all of this stuff. And something that comes up is like people will say, if you think Dune is a white savior story, you are interpreting this incorrect, right? The point is that Paul and Jessica are kind of dicks for manipulating the Fremen in the way that they are, and it's actually kind of more of a comment on the inherent insidious nature of like white savior stories than it is actually, you know, played straight a white savior story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's so much a comment on the white savior story as it's just kind of about like, like larger political machinations, right? Like, like any type of like, how like essentially how like any sort of savior, like it's manufactured, right? And so like that it's I don't think Frank Herbert would have been the type of person to have been like in a white savior stories are bad, but just kind of like savior stories are kind of like not great.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, it's also such a convenient plot device, right? Because you just get to introduce somebody to a new culture and you get to explain all of crazy shit, which is I don't know,
I
like on
forgot I
like a world
forgot
building
about
level.
this. Charles brings up something is like Jessica basically converts a bunch of the water of life into something that's safe for like normies to drink, and they all drink it and basically have like a have like a what's the thing in the middle of the desert that all like the weirdo tech bros do. Um,
What the fuck are you talking about?
the
Like a seance
No, Black
or?
Rock Desert. Black Burning Man. Thank you, Lily.
Oh, I understand Burning
Yeah,
Measure.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, it's a specific thing. Burning Man,
Yeah,
sure. And they just
yeah.
have Burning Man.
Uh,
Listen, we all gotta fly our private jets to Burning Man, okay?
yeah, yeah. No, except it's a bunch of Fremen, right? So they.
Yeah, a bunch of friends. Oh.
But yeah, yes, that is the thing. Yeah, man, I really need to go reread these books.
It's really interesting that his son dying is what makes Paul go on jihad. That elongates the timeline by a ton. This happens within a year, right? You know, because Jessica is pregnant the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't think it elongates the time that much, if I remember correctly. I think he gets Johnny preggers pretty quickly, and it just although I guess Aaliyah. I forget when Aaliyah's born. Um, I'm sure one of our friends in the chat will enlighten us. It also might be a thing where like because she's a Bene Gesserit, she can like make it happen slower or something. And that would not
yeah, in the
that would
book
not
there's like a
surprise me.
10-year time skip. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's funny because it's one of the things that I really appreciate about this book, or about this movie. The thing about the movie that I think I like the most, which is, I guess complicated, right? The thing I like about the movie is it feels like the second coming of um Lord of the Rings to me. I said this to a friend of mine, right? Which is to say that like it's just a huge monumental epic that's it's very sincere, it's played very straight, right? And is kind of I don't know, it just it feels so different compared to everything else that is sort of around it, which is how I felt about Lord of the Rings you know, when we were kids, and it's really sort of how I feel about Dune now. How much do we complain about pathos, you know, or I'm sorry, bathos, right? How much do we complain about like the cringe, you know, humor that gets like injected into these movies? And I like a lot of that humor, right? And I'm on board for some of it, right? Like there are movies I'm sold on it, and pisses me off, right? Like the Marvels was pretty bad. But you know, I don't know, whatever. Like Aquaman, I was fine with it, kind of thing. And I sort of think that something that makes Dune feel so good, and um, I think people connect to with Dune compared to you know, I don't know, other movies that are coming out, is that it is played straight as a fucking arrow, right? This is just like hard science fiction of a big, epic, tragic hero's journey, right? Playing out on the silver screen. It's like, God, I love every second of this. And I feel like that's probably why, like, it's killing at the box office or whatever. The first one killed at the box office too, which sort of, I don't think anybody really predicted until it just sort of happened. And now we're kind of in the world. But anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I am looking forward to more of it. Charles in the chat brings up that Aaliyah is like 7 when they take back Eric and her not being there is weird. Well, that's something I had forgotten about. I do not remember Aaliyah being particularly like. I did not think that final scene was particularly was particularly hurt by Aaliyah not being there. But this makes sense now that he brings it up, because a lot of Aaliyah talking to Jessica just like kind of happens. Like she comes out like fully speaking words because like she's like fucking like when the Reverend Mother that comes down with the Emperor whispers abomination, right? That's Aaliyah, right? Aaliyah is the real abomination. Like Paul's just kind of like weird. Right. Yes. Yeah. It's the lore is wild. Yeah, Aaliyah is killing soldiers in the battle.
So taking their water is interesting. Is taking the water of Harkonnen because they're chemical? Like there's something about chemicals.
The Sardaukar,
right?
not Harkonnen.
Oh, those were Sardaukar.
The ones that they, I believe they were Sardaukar. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, in the final battle, it would have been Sardaukar, but I'm saying in the movie they kill Harkonnens and they take the water. And he says, it's filthy water, but like you can use it to like clean and shit.
Were they?
Is that do like the Harkonnen like do like crazy? I don't know, something.
Probably. This is all stuff. Like, frankly, I am past like kind of like the granularity of the things that I particularly remember.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
that was a detail I really loved, just in the sense of kind of like a good guy bad guy thing, right? Like the good guys, I don't know, like the good guys, they look like the Atreides, right? Big, I don't know, strapping young twinks, I guess I would call them. And then the bad guys, like the bald, like no hair, like this, whatever. That just the implication that they're like not even genetically altered, but like that they're on like chemicals, right? It's like how like Nazi soldiers were on amphetamines, or like that kind of thing.
Yeah. It would like that sounds like a detail that could have been in the book, but Charles says that that's not true. So I will take
not
it
literally chemical blood. Okay.
Yeah. Although I feel like I remember something about like the Sardaukar having like being like altered in some way, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Did you like that he talks to Jamis? I remember you told me in the first movie that was something you wish, I don't know, was a thing.
What? That he talked to Jamis? Yeah, I mean, I thought it was all fine. Like I thought the movie was good, right? Like my problems, my only problems with the movie were deviations from the text in a way, like I said, like I'm still working through how much I am just mad that it's not exactly the book, which I love so much. Yeah,
I really like the moment with Jamis. The Jamis thing I think is neat because I don't know.
Oh, that's right. That's the thing that doesn't happen in the movie, if I remember. I believe that Jamis has like a wife and kids, and like Paul has to like take over for him.
Oh yeah, he like inherits. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's like the Last Samurai shit, right?
Yeah.
What a wild reference. Famous Tom Cruise movie, The Last Samurai. Good movie though, to be fair. Also a white savior story, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, what else do you want to talk about? We're at an hour. We can keep going.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like listen, I feel like I've said my piece. Okay. This thing is great. It's transcendent. I feel like Dune is the kind of movie that is going to sort of like stand the cultural test of time, I guess is really what I am predicting for Dune. There are some of these movies that come out that I feel like fall by the wayside. I feel like Dune is not one. And the way that it has presented a lot of the stuff that it has presented will probably carry forward, I guess. This would be my prediction, right? Into, I don't know, future stuff and projects and all that other kind of stuff. So that's, I don't know, that's really it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I said, I recommend you go read the book. I recommend everybody who's here go read the book. I need to read the book again. Man, it's on the list of I want to read Starship Troopers. I want to reread these books. I want to. Speaking of sci-fi epics,
are we gonna read Starship Troopers?
Speaking of books that are being turned into filmic adaptations, Three Body Problems coming to Netflix soon, I think. And I really like the first Three Body Problem book. I liked it particularly because the book opens with like a Mau Mau session, and it like being described as like being portrayed as like super evil.
What is? I've never heard of the Three Body.
You've never heard of Three Body? So it's by a Chinese author. I believe the guy's name is Cixin Liu. Forgive my pronunciation, internet. But it's about like it is written by a guy in China that was serialized, and they rearranged it in the so basically in the English version, it opens with like a Mau Mau session where like one of the characters' parents is like being like stoned to death for being like a professor, and
okay,
it was in the middle of the Chinese version because he needed to establish it as a thing before he went and like criticized the Chinese party. And so when they went to translate, they were like, this probably belongs better. He's like, oh yeah, I wanted it to be there, but I also didn't want to get like unalived by the I didn't want it to be like forbidden by the Chinese part, by the CCP. But it's about essentially part of it's like a video game, where like you're trying to figure out how to like in a world where like the stars are moving in such the sun. There's like three suns that move in such a way. That's the Three Body Problem. That's like basically unpredictable, and it causes like long periods of like intense winter and long periods of like incredibly burning summer. And like, how do you create a civilization off of that? And then it like extends to a thing where like like that's actually happening somewhere else, right? Like it's a very very cool book. And I read the first one. I want to read the rest of them. But yeah, but that's coming soon to Netflix. And the best character is like this detective who's like he's like kind of like a dirtbag, but he's like also he's classic kind of like a dirtbag that kind of like dirtbag with a heart of gold, right? Like my favorite. I cannot remember any of the characters' names, and I will not try and pronounce any of them because I will mangle them terribly. But I really enjoyed that book, and I can't wait.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I've never heard about this, but that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the back half of one of the podcasts, so there's that. But yeah, Lou has put
all
this...
I hear in the back of the podcast is democracy. Okay, because we've been playing a bunch of Helldivers.
yes. So, how are you feeling about Helldivers?
I came back to it more than I expected, I guess is what I would say. I kind of had a feeling that we were going to do the episode on it and I go that much further. But I just sort of ended up loading it up on my own to see what it was like to kind of like play solo. And I've actually had more fun with that than I thought. This is the kind of game that I kind of wish more people bought in on a more bought in on, right? In a world where like we have like a crew that we can pull from. This happened to us with Darktide when it went to Game Pass. A lot of people have Game Pass, so it was like, oh, let's all go play fucking Darktide, right? A version of things where we have a crew who are like getting together and playing Helldivers, right? Like that would probably like interest me more. But one of the new things they did is I bought a new weapon that I just happen to like a lot. Do you know the autocannon?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, so the autocannon is like a shoulder-mounted, kind of like armor-piercing gun. I bought the autocannon and it has completed a loadout for me that I just happen to like quite a lot. The autocannon is pretty good at dealing with armored targets. So I don't have to like play games with scout walkers. You can just get right through it because it pierces kind of through their like light vehicle armor, right? You can also use it to just like really chunk the shit out of a number of other sort of I guess I would call it lightly, like light armored kind of enemies. I haven't tried it against bugs. I've just been fighting automatons recently. Um, uh, I've also been using orbital strikes, not eagle strikes, but like true orbital strikes, like
Right,
orbital
right.
precision strike. But also, I got one that is, I think it's like the 120 millimeter battery or something like that. And using just using this loadout has really changed the game in a pretty positive way, I guess I would say, for me. Which I don't know, that feels pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry, Collins is meowing at me pretty incessantly. So yeah, I have not played as much Helldivers this week because I was out of town last week, which is why we did the episode early. Um, uh, but what else have I been doing? I've been playing what's it called? Street Fighter, of course. There was a new patches, some buffs for Zangief. Nothing super crazy. We're all expecting after Akuma drops in the spring, there just to get like a real big patch, and then season 2 to be announced. Because Akuma's the last character of season 1. What else have I been playing? Today actually I haven't gotten to play it yet. The new Crusader Kings expansion dropped, and so I'm probably be playing a bunch of that this week. Have I been consuming anything else that I thought was particularly notable? Oh yeah. I had a lot of fun a couple days ago. Summoning Salt dropped a video about the history of blindfolded Super Mario 64 runs, which is like, it's like, they've gotten it to like 23 minutes, which is just kind of like absurd. Yeah.
That is wild.
And they go from like the first one was like 3 hours long, right? Like, and then, he goes through the history, and he always makes a compelling video of that. So I would recommend that to people. And every once in a while, I feel the call of the League of Legends because Trinamortal's playing League again. I haven't booted it up yet, but it's like every time I watch a video, it's like one step closer to like opening up, downloading the Rito launcher, and oof. Lou made eyes in the chat. I saw Lou playing on like in like one of the things, like I guess in Discord. I saw
Lou playing League of Legends is a cry for help. She literally told me this. She's like, yeah, like if I'm having like a really bad day and I don't want to be around people play League of Legends, which to me is like, it feels like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, but hey, you do you know what I mean? Like the most frustrating game on all the planet Earth. Yeah, I feel that. I don't feel that. Actually, I'm fucking lying. I don't feel that. I don't want to play League ever again. It's funny. I've been talking to a friend of mine, my friend Gavin. He plays League, but he only plays Clash. Do you remember like when we play Clash? He says, yeah, like the only version of League I play now is I play Clash because you get this kind of like mini tournament arc. You get to like ban people out, do targeted stuff, like interesting comms and shit like that. So I don't know. That's
Lou says I only play Aram because you don't have to care. That's like the most fun I ever had playing League was like shitpost. The most fun I ever playing League was playing in house with shitpost comps,
so much.
and it working.
I did like playing in houses though. I did like playing in houses because like when I like crushed it in house, that was like a really satisfying. You just like go top lane and just you're on an island and you absolutely thrash the enemy person. It's like that feels pretty fucking good.
Yeah. Well,
of course, buddy is it's actually a really funny joke. That's pretty good. It's a pretty good joke. Yeah, I've been playing Helldivers. I've also been playing, have I talked about Witch Hand? Do you know about Witch Hand?
No.
Okay. Witch Hand is a game that I swear to God, okay, I only started playing Witch Hand because one of the things I do for my job is I track indie games that are coming out, right? That are like releasing essentially. And I saw Witch Hand and it just happens to use the same font as another it just happens to use the same font as another game. Like our game Ever After Falls uses the same font as Witch Hand. I thought that was like a funny little detail. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, like this is kind of cute, little like city manager sort of thing, right? Like the core understanding is that like you have cards, you put a card, you combine two cards, and they will spawn other cards, right? And it is using these cards in like a cutesy kind of way to tell
Oh,
a story about
it's like a
you know,
cute cultist simulator. If you ever played
yeah.
Cultist,
Yeah, it is absolutely like that. It comes from a guy named John Nielsen, who is a comic artist. He's like a web comic artist essentially. And he made his, he made his first game. So I've just been playing a lot of Witch Hunt. It's like a very good idle game. Right.
It looks like he has 2 other games as well. So
Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mechanobot and Lost Nova.
You know what? I guess fair enough. Yeah, sure. I guess fair enough. Lost Nova and Mechanobot. Interesting. Oh, you know what? I guess I was looking at this publisher Hop Frog. Okay, interesting. So that's also Lost Nova. Well, whatever the case may be, he's a webcomic artist, made a fucking it's called Witch Hand. And yeah, it's like a really good idle game. When I'm doing something on screen, it's just like, because you can like pause it, stop it,
Right.
start, stop it, kind of like whenever you want and all this other sort of stuff. Which is part of, I think, what makes it I don't know, satisfying and fun to play. I'm actually pretty close. It's funny because it's sort of structured a little bit like a roguelike. In the sense that like if you fuck up, you die, you lose kind of thing. And I did fuck up my very first run, which was pretty unfortunate, all things considered. But I am now in, I think, my 3rd run. I fucked up 3 runs so far, but I'm now in my 3rd run. And I don't know, I'm excited to dig into it, do more stuff with it. I've been watching True Detective recently, actually. Because the new True Detective is out, Night Country. And I don't know, the True Detective subreddit seems to think it's bad, but people on Twitter think it's good. I don't really know. It feels like it's like cultural war bullshit that I just like can't care about. I just like I'm trying to catch up and watch the new season of True Detective when I can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I saw it and I was like, maybe I should go back and watch all the other seasons. But then I didn't. Um, another video I want to call out that is very stupid but very fun is a Red Letter Media video called Marilyn Manson or Bloodhound Gang Part 2. These like they've been doing game shows like once a month recently. It's usually Star Trek trivia, but this one is like Mike Stoklasa reads a lyric, and Jay and Rich have to like answer if it's a Marilyn Manson lyric or a Bloodhound Gang lyric. Which is I found it very entertaining.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't watch their video on I didn't watch their video on Dune stuff, but maybe I need to rewatch David Lynch's Dune.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I had never watched it.
I saw it in college, but I don't really honestly remember. I am a Dune enjoy. I'm sorry, not Dune. David Lynch enjoyer. I like Mulholland Drive quite a lot, but like, if you actually ask me to like articulate that, I don't. I can't. I don't know. What the fuck do I say?
Have you seen his Netflix like short? I really liked. It's the one about the chicken.
It's the one about the chicken? What the fuck?
It's like a monkey.
What?
Yeah. It's like him talking to a monkey that's got like his face animated. What did Jack do?
What did Jack do?
It's literally like it's David Lynch talking to a monkey, and the monkey's like talking in a very stilted way because it's like I think they're matching the words like the monkey's mouth movements. And they talk to him about like I forget the exact plot, but like he's married to a chicken and the monkey. And
wow,
yeah, it's very weird. It's very Lynch.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the David Lynch Disney film?
No, what's that?
Called The Straight Story, which is based on a true story. It's about a guy who like drives a tractor across the country to like meet his like dying brother that he hasn't talked to in years. I watched it purely because someone was like, "Yo, David Lynch did a Disney film in like 1999." I was like, "It's like the most normal film in the world, right?" Like, but it's created by David Lynch.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Mulholland Drive really works for me because I thought he was like deploying his kind of surrealist stuff. It was at its most poignant, right? Because kind of Mulholland Drive is sort of about, on like a thematic level, it's sort of about like the veneer of modern society versus sort of the dark inner lives, right, that like this kind of corrupted upper middle class American life has these people sort of like. This is kind of like my, I don't know, it was just like my, I don't know, maybe like my film studies paper on fucking Mulholland Drive or whatever. But uh I guess, yeah, I don't know about, I haven't watched this fucking monkey thing. Jesus.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Uh, you no, so as I was looking this up, as I was looking at it, I saw that like David Lynch's wife is named like Mary Sweeney. I'm like, is he related to Sydney Sweeney? And apparently the answer is no. Um, but Sydney Sweeney has been all over Twitter, been all over the discourse because apparently she has ended the ass era and ushered in the boobs era, or something.
What, I'm sorry. What?
That is according to Twitter. There's also been some other stuff that's a little bit more political.
I was actually talking to Rachel about Sydney Sweeney's boobs. But I've never heard about ass era. What is the ass era? What is the
No, so
boobs era?
We are previously in an era that was all about the ass. And Sydney Sweeney has brought us into an era that is all about the boobs.
And we were in, I'm sorry.
We were in an ass era.
Okay. How long were we in an ass era?
I don't know. I saw this on Twitter. This is not like, like deep historic, but if I had to get, there is probably a thing here, like a greater thing here that you could go into like real detail about like the rise of kind of like thick with any number of C's being like a thing that is viewed as attractive now versus kind of like the stick thin kind of attractiveness of like the previous era. But that's like real sociology and not like shit posting on Twitter.
Okay, interesting, I guess. You know what? I'll just give that. Okay. That's my thoughts about that.
Yeah, so
okay.
so the other take I saw was someone posted a picture of her at like SNL and been like, wokeness is over. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? What does this have to do with everything?
That's the picture that I saw. I was just like, what is this? What does this mean? Especially because we just got finished talking about how like the definition of like the woke psyop right now is fucking Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I'm like, how on earth is simultaneously, the most like whatever, you understand.
Yes,
it is funny though. Actually, ContraPoints put out a new video. Did you watch the new ContraPoints video?
I did
Twilight?
not. I saw it.
It is not great. It's actually medium good. It is I said not great. I don't want to be disparaging because I think that she's smart. She's kind of on the money, and she says a lot of stuff that I personally, she made this video for me personally, because she's talking a lot about sort of romance, right? And sort of the fantasy romance that underpins Twilight, but like also as sort of seen through her kind of I don't know, just sort of like lens on like modern maybe relationships, I get in a certain sort of sense, right? Like, what does it mean that Stephenie Meyer had a dream about a man who's in love with a woman he has an irrevocable desire to kill, right? And then just kind of extrapolates from there about all sorts of different, right? Which is really interesting, and it's really comprehensive. And that part is really, really great. But I think she's really, really bad at relating or understanding a sort of heterosexual male perspective. Like, not even that I am one or whatever, but like at least I could understand. She has a pretty bad view of men, that I think kind of just comes from the fact that she's a lesbian woman, right? And so she's not very good at kind of articulating sort of what a men's romantic fantasy, which is a pretty key component of what she's sort of getting at, and also whiffing on, essentially. Um, I would have had a much easier time with the video if it hadn't been couched in fucking Twilight. My understanding is that people like Twilight now. Is that Twilight had a renaissance during the pandemic, and everybody thinks that Twilight is good. Actually, it's Harry Potter that was bad, and we were all wrong to
I mean,
hate Twilight.
that sounds like something manufactured because
It's still awful.
yeah, it sounds like, I was long on, read another fucking book train about Harry Potter before people decided that, arbitrarily decided that they hated it for reasons entirely unrelated to the text. But I never thought it. I always thought Harry Potter was bad. But I also never read Twilight, so.
I also never read Twilight, but I think I might have to, in order to get it. Honestly, the thing that really makes me want to
Nobody
like
do not read Twilight except the light of Islam and read Dune.
I will probably read Dune. That's true. See, because actually, this is a good example. This is part of the thing that ContraPoint Space. I think I could make an argument that the kind of romance in Dune, that's a male-centered romance story, right? This sort of the romance that he has with Chani in this is sort of like a male fantasy around, like, centered around romance, right? Being pulled between love and duty, right? This is like part and parcel. So in the same way that we might think it is a like a woman's romance is built around kind of maybe the tension between sort of like attraction and aggression, right? Because like part of female romantic fantasy is about like the desire, right? This is something that ContraPoints talks about, is about craving and yearning, right? I don't think men have that part of the fantasy. I think the part of the fantasy that men have is like they want to be Paul Atreides, who is in love with a woman that he feels like he cannot be with, right? Like that is, I don't know. That would be, this is also sort of like Anakin Skywalker would be a good example of this. Anakin Skywalker, he's pulled between his love and his honor thing. This is all like male romantic, in my opinion. I think this is all stuff that she misses, but it's a good video and I would recommend it, I guess. If only because she has some of the funniest jokes I think I've ever heard. There's one joke, because she talks about a radical a rad femme lesbian, whose stated platform was abolish heterosexuality. It goes into just like this wild story, and she's like, this person's pretty awful, but the way that she arrives at her opinions is fascinating. And there's just like so many bits in there that are so classic, and I love all of them.
Yeah. So Lou's been going off in the comments about.
I'm sorry, I haven't been reading. To be fair, I do think that misogyny does affect reviews and public perceptions of books, movies, songs aimed at young females. I think that's also very true. I think that society tends to hate stuff for young female women, just sort of like naturally.
So I don't know how much I 100% agree with that. Like she goes and talks about these types of stories overly sentimental, lack complexity, but Twilight is not your poster child for that shit. I think the problem is that like 99% of everything is shit, and like the popular stuff is also like very shit, right? Like I think you could like put this through the mirror and be like, men like dumb jock shit, right? Which is why like Tom Clancy has his name on 70,000 things under the sun. It's basically the same story 50,000 times, right?
Yeah, that's probably pretty fair.
And like maybe there's the like I don't think anybody's calling Tom Clancy, stuff.
Yeah, the phenomenon that I'm describing is young, is like Justin Bieber, like the hate that Justin Bieber gets, or like boy bands or something like that. Like if teenage girls are obsessed with something, like the culture, like wider American culture, has a tendency to just kind of like hate it without not even without reason, but just like reflexively is really what I mean to say, right? You know, that kind of thing. And I feel like Twilight is, you know,
Okay.
is both, right? It is both a thing that is bad and a thing that people hate because, you know, teenage girls. It's written for teenage girls.
Okay. I can maybe buy that. Yeah.
I was really upset with the normalizing of Bella's suicide attempts as something normal in teens with who experience this obsessive, crazy version of love without examination. I did not know there were suicide attempts. I don't. Okay.
Is there like a male equivalent of like you know, Swifties or like, you know, K-pop stands, like
Maybe like Warhammer 40K people. You know
but
what I
that's
mean?
not
Just
like, but that's not really popular, right? Like that's like nerd shit,
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, that's not the thing you want to compare. Like, you know, it's not a mainstream thing to compare to, right? Like that's like a niche thing, which has its own kind of
I
niche.
almost want to say like Aiden Ross or like any of these like dumb, you know what I mean? Like 18-year-old streamers that have just like all
Sure, I
boy,
mean,
like, I
maybe
don't
it's
know.
just like mostly like sports, but like their dads are also doing that, so no one kind of like blinks an eye or something, right? Like pro sports or like, you know,
Yeah.
or
Joe Rogan.
Jackass maybe, but like people like
Jackass would maybe be an okay, but I make arguments for Jackass. I think Jackass is art, right? And I think that opinion has
but
been borne out because Spike Jones is good, right? Like that kind of thing.
I also feel like Joe Rogan kind of gets like a lot of reflexive hate. Like I don't particularly like Joe Rogan. I think
Okay.
his interviews are shallow or not, but I also think it's getting a lot of that same kind of like reflexive hate, just because like he's not exactly in the mold of something, right?
Jesus
Like,
Christ. Did you know about this? After Edward dumps her, Bella discovers that Edward can still sense when her life is in danger and will come to save her, so she jumps off cliffs and does wildly dangerous shit that could kill her just so he'll come give her a hug again and scold her.
that is
That's
fucked. That yeah.
You know, it's funny. I want to give. Okay, I want to
On this
present a
podcast,
defense.
we will take a strong stance against teenage suicide.
Is that a suicide attempt though? I feel like not. If like that to me is what like what's the difference between that and
No, but so like
Lois Lane?
that is like every fucking red flag, right? This is like from you know, this is a very male perspective, right? But this is like, I will kill myself if you do not stay with me, right? That is like you know, like number one like red flag. Get out of there as fast as you can. Go no contact. Move across the country.
I absolutely agree with this. I absolutely agree with this. I'm talking about the supernaturalness, like the supernatural nature of it, right? Okay, there's zero guarantee he can get there in time. She's taking it on face that he can cover the distance. He's not even in the state for some of them. That is actually pretty funny. But it's just like, is it a suicide attempt if somebody is you know, is reliably informed that by supernatural powers, the person who they are attempting to emotionally manipulate is going to know that they're trying to kill themselves? Kind of not. And I'm aware I'm making a Thermian argument. You know what a Thermian argument is?
I'm not
A
familiar.
Thermity argument, it's a term, it's like an internet term, but it was invented because the Galaxy Quest, right? In Galaxy Quest, the Thermians are the aliens who think that the TV show is
It's
real
real.
life. And so it is using the logic of the world in order to justify bad things about like the work. And I am aware I'm making a Thermian argument. I am 100%. But also in that nature, it's like in a warped sort of way, like makes sense. Do you know what I mean? No,
No.
shaking his head. Shabango's shaking his head no for the listeners.
I'm,
I'm tired.
I'm also caught on Charles' comment. We only stand Gen Z plus suicide.
I want to make so many edgy jokes, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
You know
I'm
what?
better than that, okay?
We're
I'm a 35-year-old man. I don't need to make edgy jokes in my podcast, okay? Whatever the case may be.
Charles, I have seen Galaxy Quest. I think I saw Galaxy Quest with you, along with Down Periscope. Have you seen Down Periscope, buddy?
I've seen Galaxy Quest. I don't know that I've seen Down Periscope.
Down Periscope is not related. It's just a film that Charles, I randomly watched on my own at some point as a child, and Charles was like, Down Periscope's great, and we watched it, which is about, yeah, it is entirely unrelated to anything, but it's like a comedy, right? Like, Anyway,
Oh,
read
sure.
Dune,
Okay.
watch Down Periscope, don't commit suicide. The 3 takeaways from this from this podcast. Buddy, let's wrap it up here. If you'd like to email us about anything we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can watch these. You can watch us at twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/derpsgames. We go out live. Rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you find podcasts. Links will be down in the description. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
Oh my fucking God. That is funny as fuck. You know what? I have nothing I'm looking to promote.
All right. With that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.